I want to get your reaction to this comment to start. The comment is one problem for smaller specialized consulting firms in the B2G space is that government customers have a stricter RFP requirements and often only accept offers from big consulting firms as a way to ensure compliance and reliability. And then they say in parentheses, big firms with long history are less likely to fail mid project. And they say this creates a significant barrier for smaller firms trying to break into the market as they may not have the same level of resources or established reputation as their large counterparts. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, it's the person is touching on a true perception in the market. I mean, that is something that people perceive to be true, that, big consulting firms aren't going to fail mid project. Although I totally disagree. I don't think that's true at all. But that is the perception that, if you hire a big consulting firm, it's somehow safer. It's somehow a more, it's a known commodity. A lot of times the software or the larger consulting companies can lowball their estimates. They can come in at a lower cost because they've got so many resources on a project that they can afford to take a hit on their margins. So there's a lot of things like that that lead governments to falsely think that big consulting firms, big well-known brand name consulting firms are going to be somehow safer. But the reality is, I don't think that's true at all. I think some of the smaller providers can provide better service, better value, certainly at a lower cost. But I almost feel like sometimes with government entities, as well as any sort of big, massive multinational company tends to think this way too. It's almost like they're so risk adverse that they actually are increasing their risk by thinking that they're being risk adverse by hiring, a big brand name. It's sort of like the saying that no one ever got fired for hiring IBM, no one ever got fired for hiring Accenture, or insert big name here. And the only problem with that is I can name lots of people that got fired for high firms, but there's still this false perception that it's somehow safer. So I don't know. I think you have to find the right balance. They certainly have a role. Those big consulting firms do have a role and a place in the market. But I think it's when companies just completely outsource to them or completely defer to them, that's where it gets real dangerous and unhealthy. And that's where you get these big budgets that spiral out of control, these big projects that take way too long and become big money pits. So I think that comment was that from one of my TikToks, one of the TikToks where I'm talking about the big consulting firms getting
It
questioned
was,
by the.
yeah, it was, it was not from TikTok, it was from YouTube, but from that
Okay.
same video of big consulting firms.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. There's if you go to my TikTok, I have a couple videos pinned at the top. At the time we're recording this podcast anyway, there's a couple pinned at the top where I sort of call into question the value of big consulting firms, and it's generated a ton of comments on there. So if you want to be part of that conversation, especially on TikTok, people are pretty chatty on TikTok. So there's a lot of good conversation happening there, and it's related to like the government of Saudi Arabia, or actually not the government technically, it's the wealth fund, the organization that basically invests in all the big companies in Saudi Arabia. They've banned PwC from doing any consulting work for any of those 100 companies for the next year. So I posted a video about that, and then I got a ton of comments on the value or lack thereof of these big consulting firms, and it's really interesting to read through some of those comments. So if you are on TikTok, I encourage you to go check out that video and join that conversation.
yeah, absolutely.